Hey boys and girls, it is week 6, Tuesday, 4/28/20, and today we're going to be doing a lesson on quadrilaterals before we get into the Google Slides called Shape Attributes. Alright, in this lesson we start out with polygons. Now you guys are all familiar with the polygons, and they start out with the simplest shape of a closed figure, the top triangle, a quadrilateral. A 5-sided figure is the pentagon. A 6-sided is the hexagon. This is a more familiar one. The 8-sided figure is the octagon. Okay, so we have a variety of polygons that have their names based on the number of sides and angles that they have. But in 5th grade, the polygons that we're going to focus on are the quadrilaterals. And so we need to know how to classify a quadrilateral. Okay, here's some examples of 4-sided closed polygons. And some of them fit very nicely into a certain category, while other ones don't. Okay, so the question is, how can you classify a quadrilateral into a category based on its properties? Okay, well, quadrilaterals are 4-sided closed figures. They have sides and they have angles, and these are their attributes, which is another name for properties. All right, then we ask, how can you describe the sides and the angles of quadrilaterals? All right, well, you can describe them by looking at the sides and deciding if they're parallel or if they're perpendicular. Are the sides equal in length or not? Then you look at their angles. What type of angles do they have? Do they have right angles? Are the angles acute or are they obtuse? Or maybe you're just going to use an exact measurement. Another attribute you can use is its line of symmetry. Okay, and a line of symmetry are lines that divide a shape into similar parts. Okay, so we use those different properties to put the quadrilaterals into categories. Okay, a quadrilateral has to have certain attributes in order to be included in a category. So it has to meet certain requirements in order to fit into the certain categories. All right, well, what are these categories? Well, the most general category is the quadrilateral category. Any polygon with 4 sides can fit into it. So if you have 4 sides and you're a closed figure, you can fit into that category called quadrilateral. Another category is the parallelogram. The quadrilateral has to have exactly 2 sets of parallel sides to be classified as a parallelogram. Now these are all examples of parallelograms down here because they fit that particular requirement. They have 2 sets. There's one set and then the second set of parallel lines. And that is true for each of these shapes. So all of those shapes are called quadrilaterals, and they're also called parallelograms. Another category is called the trapezoids. If a quadrilateral has exactly 1 set of parallel sides, it is classified as a trapezoid. Here's an example of a trapezoid. It has 1 set of sides that are parallel. The other pair of sides are not parallel. Then there's a category called a kite. If a quadrilateral has 2 pairs of equal length sides that are adjacent, that means they sit side by side, not across from each other, but side by side, then it's classified as a kite. And the kites that we can fly on a windy day are that particular shape. They have 2 equal length sides. There's 1 pair, and then another 2 sides that are equal length. That's the second pair. And they are adjacent to each other, sitting side by side. Another category is the rhombuses. If a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, that means it has 2 sets of parallel sides, and each of those sides is the same length, it is called a rhombus. So here we have a rhombus. There's our 1 set of parallel sides, 2 sets, and each side is equal in length. So you might say, why is that square in with this rhombus? Well, the square meets those same requirements. It has two sets of parallel sides, and each side is equal in length. And this shape here, you might think it is a diamond, but it's actually just a square that's been rotated. If a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, that means it has two sets of parallel sides, and its sides are perpendicular. Okay, now from fourth grade, you learned that perpendicular means two lines that intersect at 90-degree angles, or right angles. If it has those attributes, then it is a rectangle. All right, so we have a couple of shapes down here that meet those requirements. The two sets of parallel sides, and the lines intersect, forming right angles. They are perpendicular. And then the last category of quadrilaterals are the squares. If a quadrilateral has two sets of parallel lines, equal length sides, and the sides are perpendicular, it is a square. So the most restrictive category is the square, because it has so many requirements that you have to be in that category. Now, it's a common misunderstanding to think that shapes will only fit into one category. If we think about the square meets the requirements of being a quadrilateral. It has four sides on it that are closed. It's a parallelogram because it has two sets of parallel sides. It is a rectangle because it has two sets of parallel sides and it has perpendicular angles. And it's also a rhombus. It has two sets of parallel sides, and all four sides are equal in length. And it also belongs to the category of the square. So it can belong to many different categories based on its attributes. Now, one way of helping us remember which categories a quadrilateral belongs to is to look at a hierarchy. This is a quadrilateral hierarchy. It starts at the top with polygons. From the polygons, we branch off into only those shapes that have four sides, which are the quadrilaterals. If a quadrilateral has only one set of parallel sides, it falls into this category, the trapezoid. If the category has two sets of equal length sides that are adjacent, then it falls into the kite category. Over on this other side, we see that we have the sets of parallelograms, or the category of parallelogram, two sets of parallel sides. If those parallel sides intersect and form right angles, then they are rectangles. If there's a parallelogram with equal length sides, it's in the category of the rhombus. If you are a rhombus and you have 90-degree angles, you're a square. And if you are a rectangle, but each of your sides are equal, then you're going to be a square. And so this hierarchy lets us look at this from the bottom up, and we can see that a square is a rhombus, but a rhombus is not a square. A square is a rhombus, a square is a parallelogram, a square is a rectangle, and a rectangle is a parallelogram. So if we look at this from the bottom going up, we can see which things are in more than one category. So this rectangle is also a parallelogram. A rhombus is also a parallelogram, but the rectangle and the rhombus do not fit into each other's categories. All of these fit into the category of quadrilateral, which fits into polygons. In summary, quadrilaterals can be grouped into categories based on their properties or attributes. These properties include the four sides, the four angles, the parallel sides, their right angles, and their congruent sides, which means the same side. So boys and girls, that's a lot of information about quadrilaterals. Always know that you can go back over this video to learn those definitions or those attributes of each of the quadrilaterals.